Hey guys, tonight we step into the restless heartbeat of Lagos in the early 1970s, a city that never truly sleeps. The air is thick with the scent of roasted plantains and petrol fumes, the honking of impatient taxis weaving between market stalls and pedestrians. Neon signs flicker against corrugated rooftops, their glow casting restless shadows over a place where fortunes can change between one breath and the next. Somewhere in this hum of engines and human ambition, a young man named Ishola Oyenusi is discovering the first hints of his gift. A grin that could melt suspicion and a hunger for the sort of money you don't earn in daylight. You probably won't survive this world if you step in without knowing the rules. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're here, let me know your city and local time down in the comments. Because somewhere out there, you might just be listening under the same moonlight that once watched over the Smiling Bandit. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The year is 1970, and Lagos is in a season of contradictions. Oil wealth is swelling Nigeria's economy, yet the city's underbelly remains untouched by prosperity's light. In cramped neighborhoods, young men gather in the glow of kerosene lamps, whispering about easy scores, about the soft pockets of businessmen too comfortable in their routines. Among them, Ishola stands out, not for size or for muscle, but for the way he can command attention without raising his voice. He has a gift for making people underestimate him. His earliest ventures are petty, lifting watches from inattentive shoppers, swapping counterfeit bills for genuine naira in crowded markets. It isn't the money that hooks him first. It's the feeling of control, the ability to bend a situation toward his own advantage. A neighbor later recalls how Ishola, barely 20, could walk away from an argument with the other man convinced it was his own idea to give up. That grin, part charm, part dare, makes him almost untouchable in these small-time games. But Lagos isn't a place that lets you stay small for long. Opportunity arrives like a sudden downpour. A friend of a friend mentions a merchant who keeps the day's cash takings in his shop overnight. Ishola listens, nods, and asks just the right questions. Later, he slips into the shuttered store, quiet as the Harmattan wind. When he walks out again, his pockets are heavier and his smile broader. Word travels fast in neighborhoods where everyone knows everyone. Within days, he is being approached by older, more seasoned men, the sort who drive imported cars and keep their voices low in public. They're curious about the boy who didn't just take money, but left without stirring the air. Ishola knows better than to seem eager. He lets them think they're recruiting him, while already mapping how to turn their offers to his benefit. The city around him is changing. New bridges link old districts. High-rise hotels sprout where tin-roofed shops once stood. Yet beneath the surface, the same old game plays on. Those who have and those who want. Ishola, standing on the edge of both worlds, is beginning to choose which side he'll call home. One evening, leaning against the rail of Carter Bridge, he watches the city lights shimmer on the lagoon. In the hum of the traffic and the chatter of passers-by, he can already hear the beat of his own legend forming, one that will carry his grin into the darkest corners of Lagos. Lagos, after dark, has its own rhythm, quicker, sharper, and less forgiving than the daylight hours. In the back streets of Mushin and Abut Meta, teenagers drift in loose groups, swapping gossip and plotting petty hustles. It is here, In the narrow lanes where market stalls still smell of smoked fish and damp burlap sacks, that Ishola Oyenusi learns the art of blending in until the exact moment he wants to stand out. He isn't the biggest boy on the block. In fact, next to some of the older lads, he looks almost slight. But he understands something they don't. People fear unpredictability more than they fear size. Ishola can turn from easy laughter to stone-cold silence in a heartbeat, leaving those around him slightly off balance. This is his edge in a world where hesitation gets you nothing but empty hands. His early schemes are simple. He teams up with a pair of friends who know how to work the chaos of a crowded street. One distracts a seller with questions about prices. Another leans in, pretending to inspect the goods. Meanwhile, Ishola's quick fingers slip a handful of notes or a valuable trinket out of reach and into his own pocket. The trick isn't just taking, it's leaving without a ripple, as if nothing ever happened. Sometimes they run errands for older boys in exchange for small favors. A clean shirt, a borrowed bicycle, or a few naira to spend on palm wine. Ishola takes these favors, but he also takes mental notes, learning who owes who trusts who, and more importantly, who doesn't. Knowledge is currency, and he's stockpiling it quietly. There's a local tailor named Bamidele who has a reputation for overhearing everything. His shop sits at a busy intersection, and people passing through often pause to talk. Ishola makes a habit of stopping by, pretending to admire the fabrics while catching snatches of conversations. A certain merchant is late paying his debt. A young clerk has been gambling away his wages. A delivery truck often parks overnight in an alley without a watchman. Each detail tucks itself away in Ishola's mind, ready for the right moment. One rainy evening, with the streets glistening like spilled ink, he puts this knowledge to use. The delivery truck he'd been watching hasn't moved all day. Under the cover of rain, he slips into the alley with one friend acting as lookout. They don't take everything, just a few crates of imported radios. Enough to sell quickly, enough to taste profit without drawing too much attention. The radios are gone by morning, traded for cash and favors that will serve them later. These victories fuel him. He starts dressing sharper, pressed shirts, polished shoes, even when he's got nowhere special to go. It's about image, about looking like someone who belongs in any room he enters. People start to notice, and with that notice comes a subtle shift in how they speak to him. Shopkeepers greet him with cautious respect. Street kids watch him with a mix of envy and curiosity. One afternoon, leaning against the side of a battered taxi, he overhears two older gang members discussing a job. They're dismissive, certain the smiling kid couldn't handle it. Ishola steps forward, grinning. "If you're so sure I can't, why not let me try?" His confidence throws them off, and after a brief laugh, they agree to let him prove himself. It will be his first job under the banner of an established crew, and though he doesn't say it out loud, he knows it's a turning point. The dusty back streets that once held all his ambitions are starting to feel too small. Somewhere beyond them lies the Lagos that makes and unmakes men in a single night. Ishola is ready to see which one it will make of him. The first thing people remember about Ishola Oyenusi is not the jobs he pulled, nor the danger he carried into a room. It's the smile. Wide, bright, and impossibly casual, it had a way of unsettling people because it arrived when they least expected it. Whether standing in front of a police checkpoint or leaning on a lamppost before a job, that grin made it seem as if he knew something you didn't. In Lagos, charm is a currency of its own, and Ishola spends it lavishly. He makes friends with mechanics who can doctor license plates, bartenders who keep ears open and mouths shut, and taxi drivers who know the city's shortcuts like the lines in their palms. He never approaches these people with demands. Instead, he buys them drinks, asks about their families, remembers small details. Within weeks, they trust him enough to share things they'd never tell strangers. One night at a smoky bar near the port, Ishola meets Adewale, a dock worker with a taste for whiskey and a loose tongue. Adewale complains about the shipments that come in underpaid and unguarded for hours. Ishola listens, nodding in sympathy, never pushing too hard. Days later, he returns, not with an offer, but with a story about a friend who's looking for opportunities. The friend is, of course, himself. That grin seals the arrangement. The smile works in more dangerous situations, too. When a neighborhood enforcer corners him over a petty turf dispute, Ishola doesn't bristle. He laughs, claps the man on the shoulder, and offers to buy him lunch. By the time the plates are cleared, the enforcer has half forgotten why he was angry. Many people still think that Ishola could talk himself out of almost anything, though whether that's entirely true or just part of the myth is still up for debate. But charm alone won't keep him afloat in the currents he's stepping into. With each introduction, each whispered conversation, he's building a network, a web of favors and secrets that will protect him when his luck falters. It's not enough to have friends. You have to have the right friends, the kind who can stall a police report or misplace a piece of evidence. Soon, that smile begins to take on a second meaning. For those who know him well, it's no longer just friendly. It's a warning. If Ishola is smiling in the middle of a tense moment, it means he's already 3 moves ahead. Rivals begin to notice this too, and some steer clear rather than test the edges of his patience. The nickname Smiling Bandit doesn't come from one particular heist. It comes from the way he seems utterly unshaken in moments when anyone else would crack. A botched lookout, a patrol turning the corner early, a crowd forming where there should have been silence. None of it wipes that grin from his face. He uses it as a shield, a distraction, and sometimes as a weapon. It's this confidence, this unnerving calm, that convinces an older, more established gang leader to offer him a place in a larger operation. The jobs will be riskier, the take far greater, and the consequences far steeper if things go wrong. Ishola doesn't hesitate. He knows that in Lagos's underworld, hesitation is just another form of weakness. As he walks away from that meeting, the humid night pressing close, he catches his reflection in a shop window. The smile is still there, but now it's sharper, more deliberate. It's no longer just a habit. It's part of the armor he'll wear into every room from now on. The first time Ishola steals a car, it's almost laughably easy. The sedan sits outside a modest 2-story building on a quiet street, its chrome gleaming under the midday sun. The owner, a small-time trader, is inside, sipping tea and complaining to a neighbor about the rising cost of petrol. Ishola walks past twice, taking note of the angle of the street, the shadows of nearby trees, and the fact that no one seems to be watching closely. He's been preparing for this moment for weeks, learning the mechanics from an older boy who once worked at a repair shop. It's not about brute force. It's about knowing where the lock is weakest, how to coax it into turning without shattering the illusion of normalcy. His fingers work with deliberate calm, and within seconds, the driver's door clicks open. Sliding into the seat, he feels the textured grip of the wheel beneath his hands. A sudden rush of control. The key isn't there, of course, but the ignition gives way under the technique he's practiced in back alleys. the engine comes alive with a low growl, vibrating through the floor. He pulls away slowly at first, then blends into the mild afternoon traffic as if he's been driving this route for years. The car is more than transportation. It's a status symbol in 1970s Lagos. Most men his age don't even have access to one, let alone own one. When he pulls up outside a friend's place in this gleaming sedan, the effect is electric. Conversations stop, heads turn. He smiles that easy, disarming smile, as though there's nothing unusual about him arriving in a machine worth more than most people's annual income. By nightfall, the car is parked in a quiet courtyard owned by a fence who deals in rehomed vehicles. Papers will be forged, license plates swapped, and within days it will be sold. No trace of its original owner, except for a police report that will be filed too late to matter. Ishola gets his cut in crisp notes, the weight of the cash both thrilling and reassuring. That first stolen car changes his standing in ways he didn't anticipate. Word of it spreads not just through his circle of friends, but among people who've never spoken to him before. The older gang members see potential. A few invite him to ride along on their next jobs, not as a driver yet, but as someone who knows how to get into and out of tight spots. It also changes how he moves through the city. No longer bound to the timetable of overcrowded buses or the slow trudge of walking, he can be anywhere, anytime. He starts memorizing escape routes, testing which streets clog at certain hours and which remain open no matter the traffic. It's an education in Lagos geography that no map can teach. The stolen sedan becomes a kind of key, unlocking access to jobs that require speed, to neighborhoods he once avoided because they were too far from his base. He uses it to shadow potential targets, to drop off packages without drawing suspicion, and sometimes just to cruise through districts where his name is starting to mean something. Many people still think that first car was a fluke, a piece of beginner's luck that could never be repeated. But Ishola knows better. He knows it was the start of a pattern, one that will carry him from petty hustles to jobs that will make the whole city talk. As he lies awake that night, listening to the distant sounds of Lagos nightlife, he feels a new kind of certainty settle in his bones. This is only the beginning. The Lagos underworld of the early 1970s is a patchwork of gangs, cliques, and loose alliances stitched together by convenience rather than loyalty. Some control gambling dens hidden behind unmarked doors. Others run protection rackets in the bustling markets. A few specialize in the black market trade of imported goods, moving contraband radios, liquor, and fabric under the noses of customs officers. Each crew has its own rules, its own rivalries, and its own turf that no outsider is supposed to cross. Ishola, still in his early 20s, has begun drifting between these circles. He isn't yet tied to any one crew, and that makes him valuable. He can move between factions as a neutral messenger, a go-between trusted enough to deliver news or payment without skimming too much off the top. In a city where betrayal is as common as the morning traffic jam, being seen as useful without being a threat buys him breathing room. But he knows this freedom won't last. The more jobs he takes, the more attention he draws, not just from potential allies, but from rivals who wonder when he'll step too far into their path. That moment comes one humid evening at a dimly lit pool hall in Surulere. A man named Fatai, known for his short temper and shorter patience, demands to know why Ishola was spotted in a neighborhood run by his crew. Ishola doesn't flinch. He offers an easy grin, explains he was only visiting a friend, and buys the man a drink. By the time the glass is empty, Fatai's anger has cooled. It's the kind of narrow escape Ishola is becoming known for. Still, the stakes are rising. The jobs that once brought in enough to live comfortably now feel small, almost trivial. He hears talk of a planned raid on a textile warehouse, an operation that promises a payout far larger than anything he's touched before. The crew organizing it is one of the most respected in Lagos, led by a man named Sunday Big Shoe Adigbite, whose nickname comes from the imported Italian loafers he wears even in the rain. Through a mutual contact, Ishola gets an invitation to a meeting. It's held in a back room behind a shuttered tailor's shop, the air thick with cigarette smoke and the smell of hot paraffin from a single lantern. Big Shoe sizes him up with a slow, deliberate glance. "I hear you're quick," he says. "Not just with your hands, but with your head." Ishola doesn't deny it. He simply smiles and says, "I get the job done. Joining a crew like this is both an opportunity and a risk. The pay will be good, but mistakes could cost more than just his freedom." In the warehouse raid, he's assigned to a key role, getting the getaway vehicle inside the loading yard without alerting the night guards. It's a job that will require timing, precision, and the same steady nerve he used on that first stolen car. On the night of the job, the city is hushed under a pale moon. The crew moves like a single shadow, each man knowing his place. Ishola guides the truck through a side gate, the lock already compromised hours earlier by another member. The plan unfolds smoothly until a guard rounds the corner unexpectedly. For a heartbeat, everyone freezes. Then Ishola steps forward, smiling, as if he belongs there. In the confusion, the others finish loading the truck, and they vanish into the night before the guard realizes what's missing. By dawn, bolts of expensive fabric are spread out in a safe house, ready to be sold to black market traders. Ishola gets his share, more money than he's ever held at one time. He also gets something harder to measure, the respect of men who've been in the game far longer than he has. In Lagos, respect is a currency even more dangerous than cash, and Ishola is beginning to spend it. In the weeks following the warehouse raid, Ishola Oyenusi moves through Lagos with a new kind of confidence. People who once knew him as the quiet hustler now watch him with a sharper eye, weighing whether they should approach him or avoid him entirely. The nickname Smiling Bandit is beginning to circulate, whispered first in the markets, then in the beer parlors, and finally in the streets where policemen patrol with one hand on their rifles. The name fits him. In the middle of tense negotiations, or when slipping through a police checkpoint with questionable cargo, that same grin appears as naturally as breathing. It's more than habit now. It's a calculated tool. The expression disarms strangers, makes them believe he's harmless, even when their instincts tell them otherwise. And in Lagos's growing criminal network, misdirection is as valuable as a well-loaded revolver. Small jobs still fill his days, moving stolen goods between safe houses, collecting debts for older gang members, smoothing over disputes between traders and enforcers. But it's the night work that sharpens his edge. Ishola becomes part of a rotating crew, specializing in quick hits on roadside stores, petrol stations, and merchant depots. They never linger, never take more than they can carry, and never strike the same place twice in a month. One evening in Oshodi, a plan goes slightly off track. A shopkeeper recognizes Ishola from a previous visit and shouts for help. Within seconds, the air is full of noise. Footsteps pounding on the street, metal shutters slamming down, voices calling for the police. Instead of bolting in panic, Ishola steps into the nearest patch of shadow, leans casually against the wall, and lights a cigarette. Passers-by glance at him but don't stop. By the time anyone realizes he's part of the chaos, he's already slipping into a side alley, prize in hand. Many people still think that his ability to appear invisible in plain sight was more luck than skill. But those who worked with him knew better. His growing reputation also brings invitations from more daring crews. Some jobs take him beyond Lagos, into Ibadan, Abeokuta, and even as far as Benin City. The rural roads are less crowded than the cities, but they're far more dangerous at night, with poorly lit stretches where an ambush can happen without warning. Ishola adapts quickly, learning when to speed through a checkpoint and when to roll down the window, smile, and hand over a small bribe. The camaraderie in these crews is fragile at best. Everyone understands that alliances are temporary, held together by profit, not loyalty. Yet Ishola manages to navigate this shifting terrain, keeping just enough distance to avoid being trapped in another man's downfall, while staying close enough to be included in the next payday. One night, sitting in the back of a dimly lit bar, he overhears two gang leaders debating the risks of a planned heist. The target, a delivery van carrying new consumer electronics, a rarity in Nigeria at the time. The payout could be enormous. Ishola doesn't interrupt, but he knows that if the job goes ahead, he'll make sure his name is on the list of trusted men. By now, his smile is more than just a mask. It's part of a growing myth. In the Lagos underworld, stories about him are starting to take on their own life, exaggerated and reshaped with each telling. Some claim he once walked straight past a line of police officers after a robbery, nodding politely as he went. Others swear he talked a furious shopkeeper into handing over cash willingly, convinced it was part of a business deal. Ishola lets the rumors grow. After all, fear and fascination can open just as many doors as money. And sometimes, they keep those doors open long enough for him to walk right through. Midnight in Lagos has its own theater. The city's pulse slows just enough for shadows to lengthen, but the hum never stops entirely. On busy avenues, yellow Danfo buses sit parked like tired sentries, their drivers asleep inside. A few bars still leak music into the street, blending with the distant rumble of trucks heading toward the port. For Ishola Oyenusi, this is prime time, the hours when most honest men are at home, and the streets belong to those willing to take them. The jobs he prefers now are bolder. He and his chosen crew target businesses that remain open late, small supermarkets, electronic shops, and currency exchange stalls. Their strategy is simple: move quickly, strike with precision, and disappear before anyone has the nerve to act. Ishola has a knack for setting the pace, his calm demeanor keeping the others from rushing into mistakes. One particular night stands out. The target is a jewelry store on a busy main road, still lit well past midnight to entice wealthy customers leaving late-night gatherings. The crew's plan relies on timing the traffic lights, ensuring they can roll up in their vehicle, enter, grab what they came for, and vanish before police can respond. Ishola is the last to enter. His role is to keep the door clear, smile at anyone who looks too long, and give the signal when it's time to leave. The whole thing takes less than 3 minutes. Bracelets, necklaces, and gold chains vanish into lined bags. Ishola sees a young night guard's hand twitch toward a whistle. Instead of drawing a weapon, he flashes that famous grin, shaking his head as if to say, "Don't ruin your night over this." The guard freezes, uncertainty rooting him in place. Moments later, they're gone. their car blending into the restless traffic. By morning, rumors swirl. Some say the thieves were armed to the teeth, others that they simply walked in and took what they wanted without a hint of violence. Ishola knows the truth lies somewhere in between, but he's happy to let the mystery grow. The thrill of these midnight hits isn't just in the payout, it's in the choreography, the way each man plays his part with unspoken understanding. A glance replaces a shout, a slight movement of the hand replaces a full command. For Ishola, it feels like conducting an orchestra no one else can hear, but with every success, the risks mount. The police, embarrassed by their inability to catch the Smiling Bandit, begin altering their patrol schedules, placing unmarked cars in areas previously left unwatched. Ishola adapts by changing his own habits, sometimes striking earlier in the evening, sometimes much later, always keeping the pattern unpredictable. On one humid night, after another quick score, the crew meets at a quiet roadside bar to divide the take. A transistor radio behind the counter hums with news reports. And there it is, his name again. The announcer calls him a menace to the city, a dangerous man who must be stopped. Ishola takes a slow sip from his glass, the corners of his mouth lifting. Being named on the radio isn't a curse, it's confirmation. His legend is working for him now, making people hesitate, making them imagine he's everywhere at once. Many people still think that such notoriety would make a man cautious, even fearful. Ishola, he feels the opposite. The bigger the shadow he casts, the more room he has to move unnoticed inside it. The police in Lagos are no longer treating the Smiling Bandit as a petty thief. He's on their internal watch lists now, his name scrawled across chalkboards in precinct rooms alongside blurry photographs and partial descriptions. Patrol commanders are given quiet orders. If he's spotted, don't just arrest him. Bring him in carefully, because a man with his reputation could cause chaos in the streets if cornered too abruptly. For Ishola, the increased attention isn't a surprise. He's been expecting it ever since the jewelry store job, when his name started echoing not just in markets and bars, but in the stern voices of radio newsreaders. What matters now is how he turns that attention to his advantage. He starts planting false trails, allowing himself to be seen in neighborhoods where he has no business. Knowing the police will waste time staking them out, he also keeps moving. Safe houses rotate every few weeks, from a spare room above a seamstress's shop in Yaba to a one-room flat behind a mechanic's yard in Agege. He learns to travel light, carrying nothing that can tie him to a crime, and he never sleeps in the same place 2 nights in a row if he senses trouble nearby. One rainy afternoon, while laying low at a friend's place, he spots 2 plainclothes officers lingering across the street. Their eyes keep drifting toward the building. Ishola watches them for nearly an hour, noting their patterns, before slipping out through a back door that opens into a narrow alley. He disappears without haste, as if he's just another man walking home from work. Despite their growing frustration, the police have to admit he's careful. Witnesses often describe him as the one who smiled, but can never agree on the clothes he wore, the direction he went, or the vehicle he used. That uncertainty keeps him alive. Still, the pressure is mounting. More checkpoints appear on major roads. Cars are stopped and searched at random. One night, his crew narrowly avoids disaster when a van full of stolen goods is waved over just outside Ikeja. A bribe smooths the way, but Ishola knows that luck won't hold forever. In response, He becomes more selective with his jobs. No more random hits on poorly planned targets. Now, every move must be worth the risk. He spends days, sometimes weeks, watching a location before making a decision. When he finally acts, it's with precision. A quick in and out, no wasted motion, no unnecessary noise. A contact inside the police force, a clerk who owes him a favor, quietly tips him off about a new unit assigned to hunt him specifically. They're younger, hungrier, and less willing to take bribes than the usual officers. Ishola listens carefully, files away the details, and adjusts his routes accordingly. Many people still think that police attention alone should have been enough to slow him down. But for Ishola, the hunt only sharpens his skills. It forces him to move smarter, to trust fewer people, to think 2 steps ahead at all times. Late one night, leaning against the cool brick wall of an unlit courtyard, he watches a patrol car pass by, its headlights sweeping the street. The officers inside are searching for him. They don't know he's only 20 meters away, smiling faintly in the dark. By the time the police name him as a top target, Ishola's life is no longer his own. It's an overlapping series of roles he slips into depending on who's watching. With some, he's the easygoing neighbor who lends a hand carrying sacks of yam flour. With others, he's the smiling face behind a job that emptied a safe before dawn. And with a select few, he's something more personal. A lover, a confidant, someone who promises safety in a city where safety is in short supply. It's in this last role that his world becomes more complicated. Women are drawn to him, not just for his looks, but for the way he makes them feel like they're the only person in the room. He listens, remembers details, and never rushes to fill a silence. For someone used to being pursued by danger, Ishola has a way of making others feel protected, even cherished. But protection in his orbit is a temporary thing. One of these women, Funke, runs a small fabric shop in Belogan Market. She's clever, resourceful, and knows how to hide a stack of naira in plain sight. They meet when Ishola buys a length of cloth as a cover for passing a message to an associate. The conversation lingers long after the transaction. Soon, she becomes more than just company. She's an occasional accomplice, slipping him information about deliveries, keeping her ears open for rumors of police raids. Another, BC, is different. She works at a nightclub where deals are made over bottles of imported whiskey. Her connections reach from musicians to men who handle serious money. BC knows the power of appearance. Her presence at Ishola's side sends a signal to certain circles that he's not just a street operator anymore. He's someone with reach. These relationships, however, are not without risk. The more people in his life, the more potential for leaks. A careless word over a drink, a note left where it shouldn't be, a phone call overheard. Any one of these could lead to disaster. Ishola manages the danger by keeping his world separate. Funke knows nothing of BC. BC has no idea about Funke, and neither of them know about the other quiet connections he maintains around the city. Still, intimacy has its uses. Sometimes, information from a pillow-side conversation is more valuable than anything that can be bought. Funke once warns him about a visiting supplier carrying an unusually large sum of cash, leading to a job that funds the crew for weeks. BC, without realizing it, passes along a schedule of wealthy patrons leaving the club, allowing Ishola to time his movements to avoid unnecessary encounters. Many people still think that Oyenusi's women were simply ornaments in his life. The truth is more complicated. They were part of his network, whether they knew it or not. Each brought a layer of protection, a shield of normalcy, and in some cases, a crucial piece of intelligence that kept him one step ahead. But every shield has cracks, and as his legend grows, so does the temptation for those close to him to trade what they know for their own safety or their own gain. The warehouse job comes together over a stretch of humid nights when Lagos feels like it's holding its breath. Word filters through Ishola's network about a shipment of imported textiles, fabrics so fine and expensive that one bolt could fetch a month's pay for the average shopkeeper. The goods are set to be stored temporarily in a dockside warehouse before being moved to inland buyers. The plan, whispered in back rooms and over small glasses of gin, is to take it before the trucks arrive. The crew for this job is hand-picked. Sunday Big Shoe Adigbite will lead, his leather soles tapping quietly on the floor as he assigns roles. Ishola is tapped for entry, getting the loading doors open without drawing attention, and keeping them that way until the last bolt of cloth is gone. His reputation for quick thinking and unshakable calm has made him a natural choice. They spend a week watching the place. 2 night guards take alternating shifts, one spending most of his time in a small booth by the side entrance, the other walking slow, lazy laps around the perimeter. The lighting is poor, and the nearest police station is far enough away that any response will be late. Ishola notes every detail, even the way the guards switch after exchanging a brief chat about football scores. On the chosen night, the city is half asleep under a cloudy sky. The air smells faintly of the lagoon. The crew moves in pairs, dressed to blend into the dockside workers who come and go at odd hours. Ishola's partner for the job, a wiry man nicknamed Two-Step, carries the simple tools needed to lift the side gate from its latch. Ishola is through first, his footsteps muffled against the damp ground. The guard on the outer lap is at the far end of the building. Ishola slides to the loading bay and works the lock, the metal soft from years of sea air. It gives with a whisper rather than a clank, a small mercy. Inside, the smell of fabric dye and packing straw is heavy in the dark. Big Shoe signals from the door, and the others move in like water filling a basin. Bolts of cloth pass from hand to hand, disappearing into waiting vans. Ishola keeps his eyes on the shadows outside, noting the faint orange glow of a cigarette where the second guard should be. Timing is everything. Halfway through, a faint metallic sound cuts through the air, the guard's keys jingling as he starts back toward the bay. Ishola steps out just far enough to intercept him. His voice is easy, conversational, as he mentions seeing a group of stray dogs by the storage shed. The guard, distracted, changes course to check. By the time he returns, the warehouse is lighter by dozens of bolts, the vans already fading into the city's nightscape. The payout is divided in the back room of a shuttered storefront. For Ishola, it's more than just the money, though the thick stack of Naira notes is no small reward. It's the validation, the nod from Big Shoe, and the others, that he's more than a clever street hustler. He's now part of the league that plans their hits with precision, not just luck. Many people still think that Oyenusi stumbled into his legend through brash acts alone. Nights like this prove otherwise. His skill lies in making danger look effortless. Crossing state lines is not something most Lagos crews attempt often. The further you move from familiar streets, the less your name and reputation can protect you. But for Ishola Oyenusi, expansion feels inevitable. Lagos is lucrative, yes, but it's also crowded. Too many crews chasing the same marks, too many eyes watching for a slip. Beyond the city lie new roads, new targets, and new networks to tap into before the police catch on. The first trip beyond Lagos is to Ibadan, a city with a slower rhythm but no less appetite for money. The target is a small convoy of delivery trucks moving electronics from the port to a regional distributor. The job comes through a contact of Bissi's, a man who works security for the distributor and happens to dislike his employers enough to whisper details for the right price. Ishola assembles a lean team, just 4 men, all of whom can keep their heads if something unexpected happens. They travel separately, some by bus, others in borrowed cars. In Ibadan, they regroup in a modest guest house, its walls damp with the season's rains. Ishola studies the delivery route on a crude hand-drawn map, noting every bend in the road and each stretch where the trucks will have to slow down. On the day of the job, they wait in a patch of roadside bush just beyond a shallow curve. Timing is key. The lead vehicle must pass without alarm before they box in the second. When the moment comes, it's swift. One car cuts in front, forcing the truck to stop. Another pulls tight behind, sealing the gap. The driver's confusion lasts only seconds before he's pulled from the seat. Ishola climbs in, his hand steady on the wheel as he guides the heavy vehicle down a dirt track toward a prearranged safe spot. The stolen goods are transferred quickly to another truck, one already carrying legitimate cargo to mask the electronics beneath. By the time the original driver finds his way back to the main road, there's no sign of the cargo or the men who took it. The crew disperses within hours, each man returning separately to Lagos over the next few days. The take is solid, not the biggest payout of Ishola's career, but enough to prove the concept. More importantly, it shows that his influence can stretch beyond the city. In Abeokuta, a few weeks later, he tries something different. A short, sharp hit on a cash courier moving between banks. The plan works almost too well, the whole thing over in under a minute. The speed of the job earns him quiet respect among operators in the area, some of whom will later serve as lookouts or suppliers when he returns. Many people still think that Oyenusi's power ended at the Lagos city limits, but with each trip, he learns more about operating across unfamiliar terrain, how to read the mood of a place, how to vanish before anyone knows he was there, and how to make sure his name arrives just ahead of him like a shadow. The more ground he covers, the harder he becomes to corner. And for a man already playing a dangerous game in the nation's busiest city, that's worth more than gold. By now, Ishola's name is more than an underworld whisper. It's appearing in bold headlines. Lagos newspapers splash it across front pages whenever a daring robbery grips the city. Smiling Bandit strikes again becomes a phrase that sells papers, each edition painting him in alternating shades of menace and myth. Some reports describe him as a ruthless gang leader, others as a clever folk hero thumbing his nose at authority. The truth, as always, is somewhere in between. The press attention is a double-edged blade. On one hand, it cements his reputation, making even seasoned criminals curious to work with him. On the other, it draws heavier scrutiny from the police, who now feel their pride is at stake. Senior officers give interviews vowing to bring him in, describing his grin as the last thing his victims see. Ishola reads these quotes with quiet amusement over morning tea in whichever safe house he's using that week. He knows the value of controlling the story. Whenever possible, he feeds small, deliberate pieces of information into the rumor mill. Claims of jobs he didn't do, sightings in neighborhoods he hasn't visited in months. The more confused the narrative, the harder it is for anyone to predict his next move. Some of the public buys into the Robin Hood angle, especially after a handful of incidents where stolen goods mysteriously end up in the hands of struggling market women. Whether Ishola orchestrates this out of strategy or sentiment, he never says. But the effect is real. He becomes a figure ordinary Lagosians talk about with a mix of fear and admiration. Taxi drivers debate his cleverness at roadside tea stalls. Traders swear they once saw him slip away from a cordon of police without breaking stride. This shifting public perception begins to work in his favor. Witnesses, even when they recognize him, sometimes hesitate to give clear descriptions. A few even claim not to have seen him at all. The myth is starting to shield the man. Of course, not everyone is charmed. Certain rival crews resent the attention he's getting, muttering that his grin is more luck than skill. One particularly bitter gang leader in Mushin begins spreading word that Ishola's rise is due only to police corruption. Ishola, hearing of this, doesn't confront the man directly. Instead, he ensures that a small job the rival crew is planning goes sideways, just enough to tarnish their credibility. No violence, no direct accusation, just a quiet reminder that words have consequences. Many people still think that the newspapers made Oyenusi bigger than he really was. In truth, he understood something the papers didn't. A story can be as powerful as a weapon if you know how to aim it. By late 1971, his smile isn't just a facial expression. It's a headline, a brand, and in some corners of Lagos, a warning that you're already too late to stop him. Success in Lagos's underworld is rarely permanent. The same streets that carry a man's reputation forward also carry whispers behind his back, and in Ishola Oyenusi's world, whispers are often sharper than knives. By the time his name is on every police list, jealousy has begun to stir in the very crews that once welcomed him. It starts small. Cold greetings from men who used to offer him drinks, invitations to jobs that suddenly never happen, the occasional side glance that lingers a second too long. In a trade built on suspicion, these are the earliest signs of betrayal. Ishola, alert as ever, takes note without showing it. If someone is setting a trap, better to let them believe he's blind to it. The first real crack comes when a shipment of imported watches disappears before his crew can move it. Only a handful of people knew the timing, and Ishola's gut tells him the leak came from within. He keeps his cool, jokes about bad luck, but quietly begins tracing the chain of information. The trail leads to a man named Salako, once a drinking partner, now apparently working for a rival gang in Apapa. Instead of confronting Salako directly, Ishola uses the same skill that has kept him alive this long: patience. He feeds the man false information about an easy job, watching from a distance as Salako passes the details to his new friends. On the night of the supposed hit, the police arrive early, chasing the rival crew into the streets. No one dies, but the message is clear. Someone has been playing a dangerous game. Tensions rise even among his closest allies. A few grumble that his growing fame brings too much heat. Others fear that his preference for high-risk, high-reward jobs will land them all in prison, or worse. Ishola doesn't argue. He listens, nods, and lets them vent. But privately, he's already deciding which of them he would leave behind if the choice came. The streets aren't just watching him, they're testing him. One evening, while sitting in a cramped beer parlor, a man he doesn't recognize approaches with an offer. A big job in an unfamiliar district, quick money, low risk. It sounds too perfect. Ishola smiles, agrees to think about it, and walks away, knowing it's bait. Whether the trap is from the police or his rivals, he can't tell yet, but it makes little difference. In his world, walking into someone else's plan is the fastest way to never walk out again. Many people still think that Oyenusi's downfall was the result of one big mistake. But the truth is, the cracks in his circle began long before the final act. Trust is a rare currency in Lagos's underworld, and once it starts to run out, even the sharpest operator has to spend the rest of his time looking over his shoulder. And now, more than ever, Ishola is doing just that. The first real betrayal comes not with a gunshot or a police raid, but with a knock at the wrong door. Ishola's crew is preparing for a routine hit on a small merchant depot in Yaba. Nothing spectacular, just enough to keep money moving. The plan is airtight. They've scouted the building, timed the guard rotations, and arranged 2 quick getaway routes. But when they arrive under the cover of darkness, something feels off. The front gate is ajar, as if someone left in a hurry. A lone guard stands outside smoking, his uniform a little too crisp for a night shift. Inside, the lights are brighter than usual. Ishola's instincts tighten like a knot. He signals for the crew to fall back. Moments later, the sound of car doors slamming breaks the silence. 2 unmarked police vehicles glide into view, blocking the nearest exit. It's a setup, but not from the police alone. Someone tipped them off, and Ishola knows exactly who it is. A mid-level associate named Musa, a man with debts in too many places and loyalty in none. Ishola had once trusted him with minor jobs, believing his street smarts outweighed his greed. That belief dies here. In the pale glow of the depot's fluorescent lights, the escape is narrow. Ishola leads his men through a half-finished wall at the back, slipping into a drainage ditch that runs parallel to the road. They vanish into the wet, foul-smelling dark just as the police sweep through the main entrance. The crew is silent as they make their way to a safe house. No one needs to say out loud that they've been burned. After that night, Ishola's approach hardens. He stops sharing full plans with the entire crew, breaking jobs into compartments so no one person knows the whole picture. Meetings are shorter, movements are staggered, and he begins to watch his own men with the same suspicion he once reserved for rivals. Still, the danger only sharpens his edge. In one daring move weeks later, he robs a cash courier in broad daylight, slipping into the crowd before anyone reacts. It's a statement, not just to his enemies, but to his own crew, that betrayal hasn't slowed him down. Many people still think that Oyenusi's talent lay only in charm and quick getaways, but surviving nights like the depot setup requires more than charm. It demands a ruthless willingness to cut ties, to burn bridges, and to trust no one completely. The smile remains, but now it's colder. It's no longer a promise of friendship. It's a reminder that Ishola Oyenusi will walk away from anyone if it means walking away alive. The bank job begins like a story whispered in the corners of Lagos beer parlors, a plan so bold that most dismiss it as impossible. Daylight robberies of major banks are rare in the city. The police presence is heavy, and the streets around them are too busy to make a clean escape. But that's precisely why Ishola Oyenusi is drawn to it. The payout will be massive, and the sheer audacity of the act will cement his legend beyond question. The target is a branch in the bustling heart of Broad Street, surrounded by traders, office workers, and the constant clatter of commercial life. Timing is everything. The job is set for a Monday morning, when the bank will be flush with weekend deposits, and customers will be distracted by the start of the work week. For weeks, Ishola studies the rhythms of the place. He learns which tellers work the fastest when the manager steps away from his desk, and how the security guards change positions every 15 minutes. He notes that one guard often lingers a little longer near the front door, leaving a blind spot in the coverage of the main hall. The crew is lean, 6 men, each with a defined role. Ishola will lead, walking in first with the easy air of a man there to make a deposit. The others follow in staggered intervals, blending with customers until the moment arrives. At exactly 10:17 a.m., the room changes. Doors shut, voices rise, and the tellers are staring at bags being thrust across the counter. Ishola's grin never fades. He speaks calmly, almost politely, as he directs the flow. The tension in the air is thick, but his tone keeps it from tipping into chaos. One guard, startled, reaches for his weapon, until Ishola looks him straight in the eye and shakes his head slowly. The man freezes, hand still on the grip but unwilling to draw. The whole thing lasts under 4 minutes. As they leave, the sound of the city swallows them. Car horns, street hawkers, the distant thrum of a generator. They step into a waiting vehicle, one of several decoys arranged for the getaway. Within minutes, they're gone, dispersing into pre-planned routes that make pursuit nearly impossible. By noon, the city is buzzing. Radios blare updates, calling it one of the most daring robberies in Lagos history. Some witnesses swear they saw the leader smiling as if he were greeting old friends. Others claim the gang vanished, like smoke. The police launch a full-scale investigation, but Ishola has already put days between himself and the scene. The payout is enormous, enough to keep the crew comfortable for months. But the real gain is intangible. The Smiling Bandit is no longer just a name whispered in back rooms. He is now a headline, a symbol of defiance against authority. Many people still think that such a brazen act should have been his downfall, drawing too much heat to survive. But for Ishola, it's the opposite. The bolder the act, the more his legend shields him. That night, in a quiet room far from the chaos, he counts his share by the light of a single bulb. Outside, the rain begins to fall, softening the city's noise. He leans back, satisfied, knowing that Lagos will be talking about this day for years to come. After the bank job, Lagos is on edge. Police checkpoints spring up in places that have never seen them before. Uniformed officers stop taxis and buses at random, peering into the faces of passengers as if the Smiling Bandit might simply stroll past. Roadblocks clog key intersections, and rumors ripple through markets that the authorities have sworn to end the embarrassment once and for all. But Ishola Oyenusi doesn't disappear into hiding. Instead, he slips into the very spaces where people least expect him. Restaurants packed at lunchtime, cinemas showing imported films, crowded church services on Sunday mornings. To the average eye, he looks like any other well-dressed young man in Lagos, leaning against a counter or chatting casually with a shopkeeper. The trick, he's learned, is not just avoiding suspicion. It's owning the space so completely that suspicion never arises in the first place. He even attends a high-profile wedding in Surulere, the kind of event where city officials and businessmen mingle freely. Moving among the crowd, he shakes hands, offers compliments on attire, and accepts glasses of champagne. Somewhere in the room is a plainclothes detective assigned to watch for him. If the man notices, he doesn't act. Ishola leaves before dessert is served, vanishing into the noise of the city. It's a dangerous game, but there's method behind it. Public appearances feed his image of untouchability, a myth that makes people doubt whether the police could possibly be closing in. And the more untouchable he appears, the more doors remain open to him, both for information and opportunity. One afternoon, he stops by Funk's fabric shop under the pretense of buying something for a relative. While they talk, she slips him a folded scrap of paper, a warning that police have been questioning traders in Balogan Market about his whereabouts. He thanks her with a small nod and a smile before stepping back into the street, already adjusting his movements for the next week. The press, hungry for new angles, runs speculative pieces about his lavish lifestyle, though most of it is fiction. They describe him driving imported cars through Marina, dining at expensive clubs, staying in hotel suites. Ishola lets the stories breathe. Whether they're true or not doesn't matter. The myth is the shield, and every extra layer of rumor makes the real man harder to find. Many people still think that showing his face in public at this stage was reckless. But for Ishola, the risk is calculated. The city's attention is a net. Step too far back and you're forgotten. Step too far forward and you're caught. He moves in that narrow space between, letting the legend walk freely while the man stays just out of reach. Late one evening, seated in the dim back corner of a bar in Butte Meta, he overhears a group of traders laughing over a rumor that he'd been spotted in Ghana. He smiles into his glass. The best hiding place, after all, is right under their noses. Corruption in 1970s Lagos is less a secret than a daily transaction. Bribes flow as easily as the traffic jams clogging the city's arteries, and everyone, from customs officers to beat cops, has a price. For Ishola Oyenusi, this isn't a moral question. It's a simple fact of survival. If the police are hunting you, better to make sure some of them are looking the other way. His first real foray into bribing officials comes after a narrow escape in Mushin. A checkpoint unexpectedly appears on a road he uses to move stolen goods. The van he's in is carrying enough incriminating cargo to send him away for decades. The sergeant in charge steps up, flashlight beam cutting through the dusty air inside the vehicle. Ishola meets his gaze, smiles, and begins talking about helping each other avoid unnecessary trouble. The conversation is short, the handshake longer. Moments later, the van is waved through, its dangerous contents intact. From then on, he cultivates a network inside the system. Clerks who can misfile warrants, officers willing to delay a raid, even a few inspectors who prefer envelopes to arrests. Each has their own price, and Ishola never haggles. He pays promptly, always in cash, always discreetly. The point isn't to make friends, it's to make debts that only he can call in. One of his most valuable contacts is a mid-ranking officer named Adebayo, whose ambition far outweighs his salary. Through Adebayo, Ishola learns about upcoming police operations, the names of informants, and, occasionally, which safe houses have been compromised. In exchange, Adebayo's household never wants for gifts that arrive without explanation. Still, relying on corrupt officials is like walking a rope bridge in the rainy season. The same man who takes your money today might sell your name tomorrow if a better offer comes along. Ishola manages the risk by never putting his life entirely in one man's hands. He spreads his favors thin, so no single betrayal can topple him. Many people still think that police corruption was his main protection, but Ishola knows it's only part of the puzzle. Bribes can buy time, but time must be used to stay ahead. Changing routines, rotating hideouts, and keeping his circle small enough to manage. There's a certain irony to it all. The officers who accept his money believe they're exploiting him, while he believes the opposite. And in a way, both are right. Each side uses the other. Each side walks away thinking they've won. Late one night, after handing Adebayo an envelope thick enough to solve his immediate problems, Ishola steps into the Lagos air. The city is alive with distant laughter, the hiss of frying oil, the hum of generators. Somewhere out there, another crew is planning a job, Another officer is counting bribe money. The game continues, and Ishola is still in it, smiling. The setup comes disguised as opportunity. Exactly the kind of thing Ishola Oyenusi has trained himself to recognize and avoid. But this one is wrapped so neatly, with so many convincing details, that even he hesitates before dismissing it. It starts with a man named Kunle, a mid-level fixer known for arranging off-the-books cargo transfers at the port. Kunle approaches Ishola in a quiet corner of a marina cafe, claiming he has information about a shipment of imported typewriters. The goods are to be moved from the dockside to a warehouse in Apapa under minimal security. The payout, he says, will be quick and clean, cash in hand within 24 hours. It's tempting. The risk seems low. The crew needed small. Ishola agrees to a meeting 2 nights later to finalize the plan. That night, the air in Apapa is heavy with the smell of oil and salt water. Ishola arrives early, parking in the shadow of a row of rusting containers. The place is quieter than he expected. Too quiet. No sign of the truck, no movement in the warehouse beyond the occasional flicker of a weak bulb. His gut twists. He signals to the 2 men with him to hold back. Moments later, faint voices drift from inside the warehouse. Officers speaking in the clipped, careful tones of men waiting for something to happen. He catches the metallic shuffle of rifles being adjusted. It's a trap. Kunle has sold him out, most likely for a police bounty and a promise to make his own record vanish. Ishola doesn't waste time on anger. The only thing that matters now is leaving without a sound. They retrace their steps, melting into the shadows between stacked crates. At one point, the beam of a flashlight sweeps so close that the dust in the air seems to glow. They wait, still as stone, until it passes. 10 minutes later, they're gone. Back on the road toward the city. Another narrow escape to add to his ledger. The betrayal doesn't go unanswered. Within days, Kunle's name quietly disappears from certain circles. Doors close to him, contacts refusing to take his calls. Ishola doesn't need to confront him directly. Lagos's underworld has its own way of punishing those who play both sides. Many people still think that this was the closest Oyenusi came to being caught before the end. The truth is, traps like this happen more often than anyone hears about. What matters isn't avoiding them entirely. It's recognizing them in time and leaving without leaving a trace. Later that week, Ishola sits alone in a dimly lit room above a tailor's shop, the sound of the sewing machine below filling the air. He flips a coin slowly between his fingers, the grin on his face returning bit by bit. This time, they almost had him. Almost. The arrest comes not in the chaos of a gunfight or the aftermath of a heist, but in the deceptively ordinary daylight of Lagos's capital district. It's early afternoon, the streets hot with sun and thick with the usual tangle of taxis, traders and pedestrians. Ishola Oyenusi is in the area to meet a contact, a man who claims to have a lead on moving some high-end watches. The meeting point is a small cafe with a view of the busy intersection, the kind of place where people blend into the crowd without effort. He arrives wearing his usual mix of sharp tailoring and casual confidence, the smile in place, the pace unhurried. Inside, the air smells faintly of coffee and fried snacks. He orders a drink, takes a seat near the window, and waits. Minutes pass. No sign of the contact. Instead, 2 men walk in together. Plainclothes officers, though their shoes are too polished and their eyes too alert to belong to casual customers. They split without speaking, one moving toward the counter, the other drifting to the far wall. Ishola knows. The awareness is instant and complete, a cold clarity settling over him. He stands, intending to walk out casually, but the doorway is already blocked by a third man he hadn't noticed entering. The move is clean, practiced. They've been watching him for days, maybe weeks, and they've chosen a public place to avoid a scene. The lead officer approaches, murmuring his name as if to confirm it. Ishola doesn't deny it. He smiles faintly, as though amused by their patience in finally cornering him. There's no struggle, no raised voices. They escort him out into the street, where a dark sedan waits with its rear door open. A few passers-by glance their way, but most are too wrapped in their own business to linger. Inside the car, the air is cooler, the windows slightly tinted. The officer in the front passenger seat keeps glancing back, perhaps expecting resistance. Ishola leans back, watching the city roll by through the glass, market stalls blurring into office buildings, the life of Lagos continuing as if nothing has changed. Many people still think that when Oyenusi was finally caught, it was after some dramatic chase. The truth is quieter, almost anticlimactic. His arrest is less a burst of action than the closing of a carefully laid net. By the time they reach the station, word has already spread. A small crowd gathers near the gates, murmuring, craning for a glimpse of the man whose grin has haunted police briefings for years. Ishola steps out, glances once at the crowd, and smiles again. Not defiance, not surrender, just the same unreadable calm that's carried him this far. Interrogations begin almost immediately, though the officers conducting them seem just as interested in seeing if the Smiling Bandit will live up to his name as they are in gathering evidence. They start with questions about specific jobs, dates, locations, the names of alleged accomplices. Ishola meets each query with the same measured calm, either denying involvement outright or offering vague, unprovable answers. His tone never shifts into anger or panic. The lead investigator, a stocky man with years of street experience, tries a different approach. He leans forward, elbows on the table, and begins listing the evidence they claim to have: witness statements, recovered property, accounts from former associates. Ishola listens without interruption, as if attending a casual story rather than the case against him. When the list ends, he shrugs lightly. People say many things when they're frightened, he remarks, and lets the silence stretch. Days turn into weeks. They move him from one holding cell to another, hoping the disruption will unsettle him. It doesn't. He adjusts to each new space, befriending some guards, quietly observing others. Small favors, a pack of cigarettes here, a whispered request for news from the street, flow in exchange for easy conversation and the occasional joke. Behind the scenes, the police push harder. They pressure known associates, offering reduced sentences in exchange for testimony. Some hold out, others do not. Ishola hears fragments of these betrayals in the murmurs of sympathetic guards. Thunka, the fabric seller, has been questioned repeatedly. Bisi, the nightclub hostess, has reportedly left the city altogether. Whether to avoid questioning or something else, he can only guess. Yet through it all, the smile remains. It unnerves his interrogators, who can't decide if it's arrogance, amusement, or something deeper. Many people still think that Oyenusi's composure in custody was an act to maintain his legend. But for those who knew him, it was entirely in character. He'd long ago learned that control over himself was the one thing no one could take away. Occasionally, they try to bait him with claims that other suspects have implicated him in exchange for their own freedom. He listens, nods, and asks, "And what would you have done in their place?" The question, quiet but pointed, throws more than one officer off balance. Nights in the cell are long, the air heavy with damp and the sound of distant traffic. Lying on the thin mattress, he replays the routes he used to take through the city, the quick turns and narrow escapes. He knows he will not be walking them again soon, if ever. But in his mind, the streets are still his. The trial begins under a sky bleached white by the late morning sun. Crowds gather outside the courthouse long before the first session, drawn by the lure of seeing the Smiling Bandit in the flesh. Vendors weave through the throng selling roasted ground nuts, cigarettes, and cheap paper fans, their cries blending with the murmur of voices swapping half-true tales of Ishola's exploits. Some are here to see justice served, others to catch a glimpse of the man who became a symbol of audacity in Lagos. Inside, the courtroom smells faintly of varnished wood and dust. Ceiling fans spin lazily, doing little to push the heavy air. Ishola enters flanked by guards, dressed in a crisp shirt and trousers that speak of deliberate care. The smile is there, not wide, not mocking, but enough to remind everyone that this is the same man who walked out of impossible situations for years. The prosecution wastes no time. They present charges for multiple armed robberies, the high-profile bank heist, and the theft of vehicles and goods across several states. Witnesses are called, some confident in their testimony, others hesitant, their eyes flickering toward the defendant as if unsure which version of him they should believe. Ishola listens attentively, leaning slightly forward at times, his hands folded neatly on the table. When his lawyer questions him, his answers are calm and measured. He admits to knowing certain people, but denies the specifics of the crimes. Many things are said in Lagos, he tells the court, but saying them does not make them true. Outside, the press circles like vultures. Reporters jot notes furiously, sketch artists capturing the curve of his grin for tomorrow's headlines. Every break in the session sees fresh rumors spilling into the crowd. Stories of hidden loot, of secret deals with officials, of betrayals that may yet come to light. Over the days that follow, the trial becomes part spectacle, part battle of endurance. The prosecution leans heavily on the testimony of former associates who, in exchange for lighter sentences, recount robberies in detail. The defense works to undermine them, painting each as unreliable and self-serving. Many people still think that the outcome was decided long before the first witness took the stand. But in the courtroom, the slow dance of accusation and denial plays out as though each word could tip the scale. Ishola seems to understand this, never breaking composure, never allowing frustration to show. By the end of the first week, the crowd outside has only grown. Some days, the heat is oppressive. Other days, sudden rain sends everyone scattering for shelter before they return, damp but undeterred. Whatever the weather, the Smiling Bandit remains the center of the storm, seated in that wooden dock, meeting each gaze with the same unreadable calm. Witnesses begin to file into the courtroom like pieces on a chessboard, each one nudged into place by the prosecution's careful hand. The first is a jittery former lookout from Surulere, a man who once bragged loudly in beer parlors about knowing the Smiling Bandit by name. Today, he can barely meet anyone's eye. He swears he saw Ishola the morning of a petrol station hit, describes the way the leader tilted his head, the way he spoke as if asking for a favor rather than demanding cash. The judge asks for specifics. The witness offers them in fits and starts, losing his footing whenever the defense presses him on dates and distances. Still, each sentence lands like a raindrop on tin, small alone, louder together. The second witness is more composed. He worked as a driver for a textile importer, and his story overlaps with the warehouse raid that turned heads across the docks. He explains how the gate latch must have been lifted from the outside, how the loading bay lights were cut at exactly the moment the guards moved to the far end of their circuit. He doesn't claim to have seen Ishola's face, only a man whose posture and stride match what he later read in the papers. The defense seizes on that detail. Papers create memories, they say. Headlines write people into scenes where they never stood. But the driver's certainty doesn't soften. He keeps returning to the cadence, the calm, the presence that directed others like a conductor. Then comes the kind of witness trials are built to capture, an old ally with a fresh deal. He steps into the box wearing a borrowed tie and an expression halfway between apology and relief. He used to ride in stolen cars with Ishola, he admits. He once held a bag open while the bank teller filled it with notes. He says he didn't want to, but fear can make a young man do what he swore he never would. He knows the layout of one safe house, the particular creak of a step near the door, the habit of setting a glass on the floor rather than the table to avoid leaving marks. Details like these wrap the room in a hush. Ishola sits with his hands folded, listening. The fans overhead thrum slowly, stirring the heat rather than lifting it. From where he is, he can see 2 rows of the public gallery. On the end of one bench, a woman in a patterned headscarf, Funk's favorite kind of print, turns her head, and for a second he thinks it might be her. It isn't, but the impression pulls a faint ripple across the steady surface of his mind. He steadies it, breathes once, and returns to the rhythm of the trial. The prosecution strategy is brutal in its simplicity. Let former associates tell the story so the jury can hear the shape of a pattern. It's less about any single confession and more about the accumulation of angles. This man saw the planning. That man saw the getaway. A third once counted the money by the light of a single bulb in a room that smelled of fabric dye. Names of neighborhoods spill out. Mushin, Apapa, Yaba, Surulere, each a bead on a string threaded by the same calm voice and the same disarming smile. The defense answers with a counter melody. Deals make men say anything, they argue. Fear paints faces onto shadows. A city-craving spectacle can turn rumor into testimony, and testimony into myth. They point out contradictions in times, challenge distances that don't align with traffic realities, remind the court that memory is a fragile instrument, especially when polished by the promise of leniency. A midday recess passes in the corridor's churn of reporters and murmured speculation. When the session resumes, the judge calls for order, and a new witness takes the stand. A police clerk from a station where internal logs tell their own story. He's soft-spoken, with ink stains on his fingers. He recites entry after entry, stakeouts that failed, tips that led to empty rooms, vehicle descriptions that almost matched. It sounds, for a moment, less like a case than a catalog of missed chances. The defense leans into that. If the state could not catch him in the act, perhaps the act was less certain than the stories make it seem. But afterward comes a turning point. A former fence from Agege who once moved rehomed cars steps into the witness box and, without any prompting, describes a sedan that arrived one bright afternoon. The driver unhurried, the paperwork already half-forged. He remembers a smile that said this was routine. He remembers a joke about the Lagos traffic being the only honest thief in town. The room reacts, some with small, disbelieving laughs, others with tight jaws. The defense objects to the flourish of humor, calls it theatrics. The judge sustains, but the impression lingers. Outside the courthouse, the weather shifts. A brief rain sweeps across the city, leaving the air rinsed and the steps slick. Vendors cover their trays with plastic sheets, and the crowd presses closer to the columns to stay dry. Inside, the trial tightens its grip. The prosecution calls a banking clerk who swears he saw that grin at the far end of the Broad Street branch just seconds before the doors were pulled shut. He remembers this not because he read about the smile in the paper, he insists, but because in that moment, the calm expression felt like a curtain lowering on normal life. He can describe the cuff of a sleeve that didn't match the rest of the suit. He can describe the steady tone of the voice that told everyone to breathe and comply. The defense, for their part, lands a few punches. They present a shopkeeper who claims the famous warehouse night could not have been led by Ishola because he saw him 2 boroughs away buying cigarettes, a timeline that would require a man to be in 2 places at once. Under cross, the shopkeeper's certainty thins. Perhaps it was a different night. Perhaps the memory is tangled with another. Even so, the suggestion of doubt leaves a trace. At the back of the room, a journalist scribbles while whispering to another. In early 1970s, Nigeria, the robbery and firearms decrees have teeth, and the city knows it. Under the military government that follows the Civil War's end in 1970, penalties for armed robbery turn severe. Trials speed up, and the public mood hardens. This is the mainstream fact that frames every sentence spoken under these fans. The era itself is impatient with men who make a theater of defiance. Another witness appears who doesn't owe the court a deal, a market woman from Belogan who claims no loyalty to either side. She speaks of hearing a voice one night, low and almost polite, telling a young guard not to ruin his life for someone else's mistake. She can't swear it was Ishola, but when shown a series of photos, her hand hovers, then settles on his. The defense challenges the lineup, says suggestion colors choices. The judge notes the objection. The jury files away the moment. Through it all, Ishola barely moves. He tracks the cadence of testimony the way he once tracked the timing of patrols. 15 minutes here, a pause there. The ceiling fan over the clerk's table has developed a faint, rhythmic squeak, a small clock no one else notices. He listens to it as witnesses stitch his life into a tapestry without asking whether the colors are true. He wonders briefly who taught the fence to laugh like that on the stand. He wonders if BC is somewhere listening to the radio, or if she's already crossed the border for good. When the prosecution rests for the day, the defense asks to call one more surprise witness. A man in his 30s steps forward, clean-shaven, with the posture of someone who still fears the streets, but has learned to meet them head-on. He says he once worked a job Ishola turned down, the kind that felt too neat, too ready to spring. He claims this as proof of discernment, even a kind of restraint. The prosecution object that restraint shown once says nothing about a dozen other nights. The exchange grows sharper, and the judge reminds them all that the court will be moved by evidence, not impressions. Yet impressions, weary, human, impossibly sticky, are everywhere in the room. A hush returns for the day's final minutes. The judge addresses the court, voice flat and practical, setting times for tomorrow, warning against grandstanding. Then, unexpectedly, he thanks the jury for stamina in a case that now stretches across weeks. People lift their heads. It is a small human moment in a chamber mostly hardened by procedure. As guards rise to escort Ishola out, he glances once more at the gallery. A boy near the aisle blinks at him as if surprised to see a face attached to a myth. The boy's hand clutches a newspaper labeled with the same two words that have followed Ishola across Lagos: the smile. It is strange, he thinks, how a single expression can become a city's shorthand for 1,000 stories told by 1,000 different mouths. Outside, the rain has ended. Puddles mirror bits of sky. Tires hiss along wet streets. The crowd reforms as if drawn by gravity. Some cheer at the sight of the guards. Some stay silent, searching the face of the man between them for regret. He gives them what he has always given: composure that neither flaunts nor apologizes. Back in the cell, the night brings its patient sounds. Distant engines, a guard's low cough, the squeal of a cartwheel in the corridor. He lies on the thin mattress and replays the day witness by witness, trimming the words down to the parts that matter. The fence's laugh, the driver's insistence, the banking clerk's memory of a cuff that didn't match. If a life can be reduced to details, perhaps a defense can too. There's a thought he doesn't voice, a private question that brushes the edge of his calm. How much of this is the city confessing to itself about fear and order, and the way both can dress up as justice? Scholars and storytellers argue about such things later. Some say the testimonies were precise. Others see the shadow of bargaining in every recollection. Where do you land? He closes his eyes and counts the squeaks of an unseen fan, the same way he once counted the footfalls of a patrolling guard. Control is still a breath he can take, a choice he can make in a small room with no windows. Morning will come. More people will talk. He will listen, and then he will stand. The smile, when it comes, will not be defiance. It will be the old, deliberate mask, the one he learned on Lagos bridges and in noisy bars, the one that let him walk away again and again while the city told and retold his story. The sentencing day arrives beneath a pale, clouded sky that hangs heavy over Lagos. By dawn, a crowd has already formed outside the courthouse gates. Vendors setting up makeshift stalls, reporters jostling for the best vantage point, onlookers craning for a glimpse of the man whose grin became a headline. Police line the perimeter, their uniforms pressed and their expressions set. Inside, the air carries the faint scent of polished wood, ink, and something else. An unspoken anticipation, taut and brittle. Ishola Oyenusi is led into the courtroom wearing a pressed white shirt and dark trousers. The chains on his wrists are discreet, but they're there, a quiet reminder that the Smiling Bandit is now in the custody of the state. He scans the room once, noting familiar faces among the spectators. A dock worker from Apapa, a former driver from the warehouse days, a woman in a patterned scarf who could almost be funk, but isn't. He takes his seat without hurry, his expression as measured as ever. The judge enters, his robe shifting as he settles into the high-backed chair. The room stills. The clerk reads out the charges: armed robbery, conspiracy, possession of stolen property, each one punctuated by the shuffle of papers and the occasional cough from the gallery. The trial has stretched for weeks. By now, everyone knows the litany by heart. When the verdict is announced, it lands with the dull weight of inevitability. Guilty on all major counts. The sentence: death by firing squad, in accordance with the robbery and firearms decree that has tightened its grip on the country since the early 1970s. The law allows for no half measures. The gallery reacts in a mixture of gasps, fear, and murmurs, and a few approving nods. Ishola does not flinch. He does not hang his head. Instead, he allows the faint curve of a smile to return, not broad, not mocking, but steady. It is a look that unsettles even now, as though the man in the dock knows something the rest of the room does not. The judge watches him for a moment longer, before moving on to other business, the gavel strike echoing against the chamber walls. Outside, the news moves quickly. Radio announcers break into scheduled programs with the update, their voices carrying into buses, markets, and homes. By midday, street conversations turn into debates. Some say justice has been served, others argue the legend will only grow in the telling. In certain corners of Lagos, people lower their voices when they say his name, as though it still has the power to draw attention. Many people still think that Oyenusi's smile at sentencing was bravado, a final performance for the crowd. Those who knew him better believe it was something quieter, acceptance, perhaps, or the recognition that the story was no longer his alone to control. That night, in his cell, he sits on the edge of the cot. The sounds of the city faint beyond the prison walls. The air smells faintly of dust and damp concrete. Somewhere, a guard hums an old high-life tune under his breath. Ishola leans back, closes his eyes, and lets the melody carry him for a moment, as if it were the hum of traffic on Carter Bridge, years and miles away. The final hours before execution unfold with an odd stillness, as if the prison itself is holding its breath. Dawn breaks pale and slow, the light creeping through the narrow barred window of Ishola Oyenusi's cell. The air smells faintly of rain from the night before, mingled with the sour tang of damp stone. A guard arrives with a tin plate of food, yam porridge and a small cup of water. Ishola glances at it, then sets it aside untouched. There are no more lawyers, no more appeals. The legal machinery has run its course, and now only time stands between him and the end. He spends part of the morning sitting cross-legged on the cot, hands resting loosely in his lap, eyes tracing the hairline cracks in the wall. The guards pass by now, and then, some stealing quick glances through the bars. A few mutter to each other about how calm he looks. By midday, he is led to a small room where a priest waits. They speak quietly. The words are inaudible from outside, but the murmur carries the rhythm of confession, of last comforts given and accepted. When they rise, the priest presses a hand to Ishola's shoulder, a gesture of final blessing, and steps back. He is allowed a brief moment in the open yard, where the high walls block most of the sky. The sunlight is thin, but it warms his face. In that moment, the sounds of the city beyond the walls, car horns, a distant radio, seem sharper, more distinct. It is the same city he has moved through in shadows and headlines, a city that has chased him, and in its way, celebrated him. When the escort arrives, he does not resist. The path to the execution ground is short, a corridor of armed soldiers and silent officials. The firing squad waits beyond a low fence, their rifles resting at precise angles. Ishola stands where they tell him, the rope at his wrists tight, but not painful. The officer in charge reads the formal order. The words are heavy, procedural, the kind meant to drain the moment of drama. Ishola listens without interruption, his gaze fixed not on the soldiers, but on a patch of sky above their shoulders. As the final preparations are made, he allows himself one last smile, faint, deliberate, almost private. It is not for the crowd that has gathered beyond the fence, nor for the officials who will write their reports. It is for himself, for the years he carved out in defiance of the rules that now stand over him. Many people still think that smile was an act of arrogance, but in truth, it was the same expression he wore stepping into every risk he ever took. A reminder that fear would never claim his face. The command is given. A sharp volley cracks the air, echoing against the prison walls before fading into silence. The legend of the Smiling Bandit ends here in flesh, but not in memory. In the days after the execution, Lagos hums with the restless energy of a city that has witnessed the end of a legend. Newspapers sell out before noon, their front pages dominated by the same stark image. Ishola Oyenusi, standing before the firing squad, the faint curve of his smile still visible. Headlines range from triumphant, "Justice for Lagos," to almost elegiac, "The last smile of the Smiling Bandit." The markets are loud with debate. Traders argue over whether his death will make the city safer or simply create space for another to rise. Taxi drivers swap embellished stories of close calls and supposed sightings, turning the man into something more than flesh and blood. In certain neighborhoods, his name is spoken with the caution reserved for spirits, an acknowledgement that even in death, some figures remain present. The police, eager to claim victory, parade the success in press conferences. Officials cite his capture and execution as proof of the state's resolve under the robbery and firearms decree. They do not mention the months, years of near misses, or the bribes that shifted the chase's tempo, or the betrayals that did half their work. Those details live elsewhere, in the private conversations of those who watched his rise and fall up close. For Fanka, for Bissy, and for others whose paths crossed his in ways the public will never know, the news brings a complicated quiet. Relief and loss arrive in the same breath. In back rooms and shuttered stalls, they speak of the man behind the myth, the way he could listen without interrupting, the way his grin could soften a room even when it was full of hard men. Over time, his story is retold so many times that it begins to bend. Some cast him as a folk hero, stealing from the rich and thumbing his nose at a corrupt system. Others remember him as nothing more than a dangerous criminal whose charm was a mask for greed. Many people still think that if he had chosen a different path, one that used his cunning in legitimate trades, he could have been just as powerful, perhaps untouchable in business or politics. Years later, the photographs fade, the newspaper ink dulls, but the legend remains. Young men in Lagos still hear his name and picture the smile that walked into every risk without flinching. Scholars debate the line between fact and embellishment in his tale, arguing over how much was truth and how much the city needed him to be larger than life. And in the quiet moments, late at night, when the streets hum low and the lagoon wind carries the scent of rain, it is easy to imagine him still out there somewhere, leaning against a bridge rail, watching the lights shimmer on the water, grinning as if the whole of Lagos were his to walk through. And now, as the city settles into its late-night rhythm, the noise of the day fades into something softer. Distant traffic, like the roll of a far-off tide, the hum of a ceiling fan turning slow and steady. The streets that once echoed with hurried footsteps and whispered names are quiet now, the lamps casting pools of golden light on empty corners. In this stillness, the figure of the Smiling Bandit drifts further into memory. The edges of his story blur, the sharp lines softened by time, leaving only the fragments that matter most to each listener. For some, it is the grin that never faltered. For others, the daring escapes that seem to mock the city's watchmen. The night air feels cooler now, carrying with it the smell of rain that might arrive before morning. It curls into the spaces between thoughts, slowing them, drawing them into the gentle drift that leads towards sleep. The voices of the market women, the rattle of minibus doors, the clink of bottles in a bar, all of it quiet here, replaced by the steady, almost hypnotic beat of your own breath. Perhaps that is where the real ending lies, not in the crack of rifles on a prison yard, but in the calm that follows, in knowing that every story, no matter how sharp or loud it once was, will one day be told in softer tones, in realizing that even the most restless spirits eventually find a place to rest. So let the smile fade into the night, let the city keep its secrets, and let the rhythm of Lagos slip into the background hum. You can close your eyes now. The streets are quiet. The story is finished, and the night will keep watch while you sleep.